Hello, and welcome to Chin Hairs and F-Bombs Conversations with Girlfriends. This is our first episode, and I'm very excited and nervous. I am SallyAnn Gray, and today I'm having a conversation with my dear, dear friend, Emily. We're going to talk about something really important to us, which is friendship. If you are new to the podcast, which you have to be actually because this is the first episode, you are new here. So am I. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in. I feel like I should tell you what you're getting yourself into. So this podcast was born out of wonderful conversations that I have with my girlfriends, my smart, wise, funny, wild friends. And this is born out of coffees and lunches and phone calls. And we're smart. You know, we don't have everything figured out, but we have some things figured out. But what's most true is that after sharing with girlfriends and sharing hard things and sharing things that can hurt and ways that I feel alone and bad and like I don't know what I'm doing, I always feel better after talking with a girlfriend. So that's what this is. So let's get started. I'm going to start by introducing my dear friend, Emily. Hi, Emily.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so happy you're here. I'm so happy you're my first guest. I'm so happy the first episode is about friendship.
Yes.
So Emily and I have been friends for, okay, now we have to do math,
Oh,
more than 20 years.
easily. Yeah.
Yeah. So we met in college. We both worked at the library together at Kansas State University in
Mhm,
Manhattan, Kansas, the
mhm.
Little Apple. So we have been friends for 20 years, and that has spanned so much. That
Oh my
has spanned
gosh.
so many miles,
So much, so many milestones, even.
milestones. We've been in each other's weddings. We have both had children, marriages, jobs, moves. So please introduce yourself, Emily. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a kindergarten teacher now and a mom of two. Um, my husband and I lived in Florida for 9 long years and moved back to Kansas to be close to family.
So you are in Kansas now, which is
Yes,
where we met. And then I had to go and move to Maine. We're like just chasing each other across the
yes,
US.
yes. Yeah. Yeah, maybe we'll move to Maine and then you'll be like, "You know what? We're moving to California.
No,
Sorry."
no. I'm going to get you to move to Maine. You're going to be my neighbor. We're going to build the
The
hamster
hamster
tunnel.
tunnel for sure. I've
Yes,
always wanted the hamster tunnel between our houses.
that's
Yes,
what I want. I
that's
want
the dream. That's the dream.
it so bad.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, thank you. That's who Emily is. You know what? I'm going to have to introduce myself. So,
for sure.
I am SallyAnn Gray. I am a writer. I'm a Midwestern gal living in Maine. I've been married for 17 years. I have two wild children of ages 11 and 12. Um, and I don't know what else to say about myself. What else should I say about myself?
That you are spectacular.
All right, that's enough. All right. Well, so let's get into it. Let's
Let's
talk
do it.
about friendship. So, we talked a little about our friendship, which, Emily, you're my closest friend.
Oh, yeah, you're definitely my closest friend. I tell you things that I don't tell other people.
Oh, truly. Like, there are things I only tell you, my husband, and my therapist. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love how we have nurtured this friendship.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
That makes my heart grow 3 sizes. So, do you recall when we started doing our every other Sunday calls?
I do recall. Actually, you know what? It started as once a month. I don't know if you remember
Oh,
that.
I
It
don't.
started as once a month, and then we were like, "Psh, we need to do this more often." And then
Yeah.
it was every other Sunday. And then there have been times when it was like, we're doing this again next week. Like we need
Yeah.
to. We did not get to everything. Like we have an agenda, couple
Yes.
agendas, I guess, and we didn't get
We
to
do.
everything. One of the things that I love about that Hale Library thing is that that could have gone a couple of ways. We were talking last week, and this has so stuck with me. You were talking about how friendships have seasons,
Yes.
right? And it could have gone the route of kind of a situational friendship
Mhm.
where we worked at this library together and we saw each other pretty regularly. But then it could have been like at graduation or whatever, when I graduated, it could have been like, okay, well, that was really fun. And hey, let's keep in touch, you know, let's keep in
Stay cool.
touch. Stay cool. Um, it could have gone that way. And a number of my friendships from that job did go that way.
Totally, me
Um,
too. I met a lot of lovely people there.
really wonderful people, and they just kind of, those friendships kind of tapered out, faded away. But I love that we've really sunk the time and the energy into nurturing this, to be, a really long lasting friendship.
Yeah, and there is a time and heart investment in that, but that's the gift in it, like,
Mhm.
that's not work.
Right.
This isn't work.
Right.
Like, we benefit from this.
Hmm, hmm.
And, like, okay, I love this too. When you lived in Florida, you and I wrote letters back and forth.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Like some Civil War,
Mhm,
like,
mhm, mhm, mhm.
soldiers.
My dearest Matilda, yes. I'm going into battle today, and it may not make it out. Here's a lock of my hair.
Oh my god. So, I love that about us, and I said this to you recently, like, I got to know your handwriting, and in
Oh,
this
yeah.
modern age and I love your handwriting.
Oh, that's so
In this
sweet.
modern age, we don't see people's handwriting much. It's
Right.
all of it is digital.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
And I feel like that's really intimate to know
Yes.
someone's handwriting,
Oh, yes.
and when you send me a card in the mail, which you do on occasion, and I love, and I get such joy from the envelope. I'm like,
Yes.
"Oh, this is from Emily. Look at her lovely handwriting."
Yes. Yeah, and
Oh,
it's like each one is like a little gift,
it
a
is.
little, this person took time and, sunk that love and time into this piece of paper that has now winged its way to me.
So yes, years ago, we started doing monthly calls, and it wasn't enough
Mhm.
because every time we talked, we spoke for an hour and a half and still had more to say.
Mhm, mhm,
And
mhm,
so then it moved to, yeah, every other week and
mhm,
sometimes
mhm,
every week. I was talking to another friend who mentioned recently that if you don't talk to a friend often enough,
mhm,
every time you talk, you have to do a catch up.
mhm. Yes. Yeah.
And how that's kind of superficial, like, you do need to know what's going on in your life, like, I do wanna know, like, how's work? How are your kids? Like, I know wanna know all that, but it's not as interesting as, like, everything
Oh,
else.
yeah, the meat of it is elsewhere.
Yeah, and
Mhm,
so you and I, by keeping this, like, cadence of talking, which we also text almost every day,
mhm.
we're always in the meat of our
Yeah,
conversations.
yeah, yeah, we get right
Mhm.
to it. We do like a
We
quick, "How do you
Yeah.
do? How's your father?" Whatever. Yeah,
Oh, yeah. And then we're like, "So,
straight
tell
into
me
it.
everything that sucks."
Yeah, yeah. "Here are my headlines for today. Where should we start?"
Yeah, exactly. We do. We have an agenda. Like, I write down the things I wanna talk to you
Mhm.
about, and we do not always get to all of them.
No, we rarely get to all of them.
Right, of course, but there's always the next Sunday. I also think it's brilliant of us that we have a standing date.
Yes.
It is Sunday at 11 Eastern,
Mhm.
10 Central,
Yeah.
because we are grown-ass people, and
Mhm,
it is impossible to schedule with
mhm,
even one person. It's like, "I'll see you next year," you
mhm,
know?
mhm, mhm. Yeah,
I'm in a band, there's 5 of us,
yeah.
and it is so hard for us all to get in the same room
Mhm.
because we are grown-ass people with lives and children and just too much to do. Alright, well, I want to also talk about childhood friendships.
Oh, yes.
The friends that you had when you were younger, friends that I had, like, when we were growing up and learning how to be friends, which is
Mhm.
never taught. It's an
Right,
important skill,
right.
and we're just not taught that. You just get thrown out into the wild.
Here you go, kid.
Yeah, and, like, there's no modeling, like, honestly, my parents didn't have friends, like,
Right.
they're not modeling that shit,
Yeah. Yeah.
and a weird thing about me is that I actually had no friends from
Mhm,
age
mhm.
0 to 10.
Yeah.
Really, I didn't. It's, like, makes me sad for Lil Sal,
Yeah.
but I didn't. I was around adults.
Mhm.
I was an only child till I was 9. I didn't have a built-in playmate with a sibling,
Right. Right.
and my parents didn't nurture they didn't have playdates. Playdates didn't exist in the '80s and '90s,
Right. Right. Right.
and I didn't live in a place where there were neighbors just out in the street that you could just party with. I didn't, never
Mhm.
did. So what about you and your childhood friendships?
I distinctly remember friends in preschool.
Mm.
My parents were professors, and I went to the daycare that was on campus. And I definitely remember having friends of, other children of professors. But, the professor families, other than the army, nobody moves more, right? Other than the military, professors move
Oh.
more than anybody. So I had these friendships, but I also remember them being very fleeting. That they were, I mean, meaningful to very little me, but just like then all of a sudden that person would be gone because they had moved. And then I got to elementary school and I met a girl there, and we became best friends. But I know now that was a very toxic friendship. That
Mm.
she was an only child and was like really used to getting her way and was very manipulative. I
Oof.
didn't know this at the time, but
Right.
that then became like the model for me.
Mhm.
Um, and that was what I learned.
Yep.
And she used to say things like, if you don't X, Y, or Z, I'll hate you for the rest of my life. And so
Jesus.
then you're learning, as a very young person to acquiesce, to do
Mhm.
things that you're maybe uncomfortable with, or do things that you don't want to do to keep this other person happy because you love this other person, like
Yeah.
it's so wound up. And then that, of course, then informed other friendships and then eventually other, romantic relationships.
Yes.
Um, and so that took a lot of unlearning from that one,
Yes.
like that one seed, right? That one.
Yes.
And what I find fascinating about that for me is that like after she moved, I became that friend to another friend of mine.
Oh.
And, like we're all somebody's monsters, right? So
Mm.
she was my monster, if you will. But then that
Oh.
was what I learned. And so then
Yeah.
I did that to another friend and I feel terrible about it to this day,
Yeah.
And I know better now. And of course, know better, do better.
Yeah.
And I wish that I had a good model for what a real healthy friendship was. Or that,
Right.
somebody had taken me aside and said, "Hey, by the way, that's not how friends treat each other." But like
Totally.
nobody did, you know?
I know. So I have a similar story, and my first real friend, and I kinda use that term lightly because it wasn't a good friendship,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
But she
yep.
was my first friend, and it was 4th grade, and she was not a happy person,
Mhm, mhm,
and she was mean to me.
mhm, mhm.
One time she opened her diary and she was like, "This, read this." Like, "What?" And I read it, and it was all about how her mom hated me because I was a bad influence.
I'm just like
Dude,
my jaw is on the floor at this point. I can't picture anybody ever thinking that you are a bad influence. But also, I mean, that makes me think that mom's
she
got some stuff going on,
she did, but
maybe mom
little
was
Sal didn't
jealous.
know that,
Right, right, of
right?
course. Yeah.
Yeah, and that same friend, um, I slept over at her house one night. Well, I think it was actually the night she let me read that diary entry, and then it was, like, time to go to sleep, and, she and her mom didn't give me any pillows or blankets, and I ended up sleeping, like, in the fetal position under a open window.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Right?
I want to, like, go scoop little Sal up and, tell her that it's not her fault. Oh my
I
gosh.
know. Yeah, and that's not what friendship is. So that was similar to you, like, toxic relationship. I was not being treated right, but
Mhm.
I also did not know that there was a different way of being. I was
Right.
like, "Oh, this is how friendship works, I guess?
Yes.
Everyone's mean?" Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah, and then these become so foundational for us,
Yeah.
like, this is the bedrock on which we are figuring all this out, and as
Well,
young people who don't have, you know, who don't have models for that,
yeah.
Yeah, my parents didn't have a lot of friends, um, we didn't have we didn't even have, like, babysitters or anything like
Mm.
that, who could maybe model things for us because my parents never went out.
So I so identify with what you said about how not only did that permeate next relationships, friendships, but definitely romantic
Oh gosh, yes.
relationships.
Oh, yes.
And so I did not know how to be treated. I did not
Yeah,
know
yeah,
how that I should be treated better. And
right.
so my first serious boyfriend, my high school boyfriend, absolutely treated me like shit, manipulated
Mhm,
me,
mhm.
gaslit me. It was very toxic, and I did not know I deserved better.
Right, right, yeah, and you're not accustomed to articulating your needs or to articulating, like, "I'm not okay with this. This is not or even just, like, walking away,
Yeah,
like, "Hey,
yeah,
dude, you're doing your thing, this
right,
doesn't work for me anymore," or
right.
whatever.
Well, and I did try that. I did try walking away from this guy, and then I would be manipulated into
Sure,
staying
yeah,
multiple times.
mhm.
One time, this is he threatened suicide.
Oh, geez, yeah, yeah,
Yep. Yeah, and then he started hurting himself in front of me. Cops got called, like, it was nasty,
yeah.
and I stayed with him for fear that he would die.
For sure, yeah, you thought it was your responsibility.
Right, well, that's what I was taught, that
Yeah,
I am responsible for other people's feelings, and
mhm.
how long I've spent trying to undo that.
Yes. Yeah.
Ugh,
Yeah, the unlearning for these things. And for me, and I'm sure for you too, continues to this day.
absolutely.
You do not have to bend yourself into a pretzel to be the version of you that this other person wants. I was reading a book recently about this woman who does kind of bend herself, who sort of shapeshifts herself into being whoever the person that she's speaking to even wants,
Mhm, mhm.
and how she's never really her true self. And I read that and almost had to like set the book down and walk away for a bit because it just resonated
Mhm.
so much. I was like, oh, I still do that. I still catch
Yeah.
myself doing that.
Yes. Yes. I know.
Ugh.
These are hard things. These are patterns. These are worn neural pathways,
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
and
Yeah,
it's a lot of work to get out of them.
yeah, it is.
All right, well, I wanna jump to talking about making friends as an adult.
Woof.
And you know my line about that is, "Not everyone is accepting applications."
Yeah, and you know what's funny? You got that line from me.
Get out of town!
You
Oh my
totally
gosh,
did. Yeah.
we share such a brain. I'm like, "No,
I
that's
know.
fine."
Yeah, I know. I
I know.
remember the woman I was talking about, and I was like, "I just don't think that she's accepting applications because I was supposed to my oldest kiddo, my now 12-year-old was gonna have a play date with, her now 12-year-old, and they didn't show. And I was
Oh,
like, "I really, wanted her to be my friend, but I don't think she's
mhm.
taking applications."
So, I think I tattooed that on my heart because not long after, I moved halfway across the country
Yes.
to a land that I didn't know a soul.
Mhm,
And I had 2 young children. I had a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old,
mhm.
and I had no friends there, and I had a remote job, so I wasn't making
Yes,
friends at
that's
the water
right.
cooler. And I never left the house because I was working remotely. The only place I went was pick up and drop off of daycare.
Sure.
And I was like, "Oh, shit. I have to make friends now," which is something I hadn't had to do in ever,
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
because I grew up in Kansas and then went to school in Kansas, and then I had college friends, and a lot of us moved to Kansas City, and so I just hung out with all these people that I had
mhm,
known
mhm,
forever,
mhm.
and
Yeah.
I didn't need to make new friends, lucky gal.
Mhm, mhm.
And then I moved and I was like, "Oh shit, how do grown-ups make friends?" And
Yes.
Emily's right, not everyone is accepting
Mhm,
applications.
mhm, mhm. Yeah.
And that was really, really hard. It was a really lonely time in my life.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I found about the only people that I talked to were, 1, my coworkers, sure,
Mhm.
which I didn't choose that, that's not like a friend you choose, right?
Yeah.
So I was only speaking to my colleagues or people I paid.
Yeah.
And honestly, good. I mean, I'm glad I had an outlet. So the only people I talked to was like the wonderful woman who was cleaning my house once a week, my personal trainer, and also my therapist. And that
Yeah.
was about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. So I worked really, really hard to make friends, actually, as an adult, as a 30-year-old woman in a
Mhm.
foreign land. It wasn't foreign, it was Maine. Um, and I ended up getting some great friends, and now I've been in Maine for 10 years,
Mhm.
and I have lovely, lovely, wonderful friends,
Right.
but that has been a journey too.
Oh, for sure. Curated friends even.
Curated is a great word,
Right,
yes.
yeah.
And I've made mistakes along the way. I had some situationships,
Yeah,
which were really helpful, and so sometimes it
sure.
was like the moms at daycare,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that was great, and I really had some lovely, wonderful people that
Mhm.
I met that way. And then when daycare was over, some of those, just faded away, and
Sure.
I had guilt about that, like, "Oh, I'm not keeping up a relationship," but I had to learn to give myself a break,
Yeah.
that not all relationships are lifelong
Right, they're
relationships.
not all for the long term.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's okay too.
yeah.
There are chapters in our lives,
Exactly.
and some of those people were right for that chapter,
Right.
and then you kind of start a new chapter, and that's not something to be ashamed about, but
Mhm,
I
mhm.
I did. I was just like, "Oh, I'm a bad friend."
But what's interesting about that is that friendship, of course, is a two-way street,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's not like these people were reaching out to you going, "Hey, Sal, let's blah, blah, blah." So you're kind of taking all of that labor of keeping up that friendship
Yeah.
and being really hard on
Busted.
yourself, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally busted. Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I take too much personal responsibility often.
for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that's yeah.
Yeah.
Samesies.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and an interesting experience that I had as a young adult is being in graduate school and trying to make friends. So we had just gotten married the May before we moved to Florida.
Wow.
We moved in August. Do not recommend. Um, and I suddenly had to make friends as an adult, but also in this really interesting situation of graduate school, which is extremely competitive,
Mm.
and maybe especially among women. I didn't really notice it among the men, but maybe especially among the women. Like, you're in competition with these people,
Mm.
and so there's this element of, like, obviously we as humans are social beings. We need to
Mhm.
have friendships, we need to have these relationships. So needing that on the one hand, but then
Yeah.
also, like, kind of don't want to get too close to these people because you are in competition with them,
Oh my god.
and so you don't really feel, or at least I definitely didn't, like I could be my true self,
Mm.
with these people. You can't get too vulnerable with them.
That's the exact
Um,
word I was thinking of, vulnerable.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so that was 9 years. That's
Oof.
9 years of my life, and I mean, in so many ways lovely. Graduate school has this, funny duality of, like, you're really isolated because you're working on your thesis and then dissertation, and you have to get that stuff done. And so
Yeah.
you see your advisor more than you see anybody. But then, yeah, that among your cohort, it is kind of cloak and dagger.
Wow.
Yeah, it was tough. It was tough to make those close friendships because you didn't feel you could be vulnerable.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Because, well, and trust, right? You didn't feel you
sure,
could trust.
sure, exactly. Yeah.
Well, and it takes trust to be vulnerable,
Hmm,
like, they go
hmm.
hand in hand.
Yeah. And
Mm.
that's where, for me, like our relationship, our friendship really helped me through that time, and then
Mhm.
my relationship with my wonderful advisor and just kind of other professor types that I met there was that those were really, really helpful. And of course, my husband.
Well, okay, something I wanted to share. So, research has shown that good friendships are a protective measure against depression and anxiety.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Specifically, the research shows good friendships.
Oh, nice.
They
Yeah.
call it
Yeah.
high quality friendships. Right? And I'm like, "That tracks." It isn't just the mental health stuff, like, people live longer.
Interesting.
Dude, apparently, no friends or poor quality friendships,
Mm.
people are twice as likely to die prematurely.
Oh my
Hold
gosh.
on. And the risk factors are even greater than the effects of smoking 20 cigarettes per day.
No way. Oh my
Yes,
God.
I read it. I promise you it's
That's amazing.
so bad friends are the equivalent of power smoking 20 cigarettes a
I
day.
can see that. Yeah, I can totally see that. When I was going through that kind of recently, I absolutely felt like the physical effects of that. Obviously the mental effects and the kind
Yeah.
of, the heartbreak of that, but just like ugh, the
Yeah.
stress of that.
So let's do it. Let's talk
Oof.
about breakups.
Ugh.
So, I have spoke with a lot of women getting ready for this podcast. I kind of surveyed some women,
Mhm,
um, and I was like, "Have you gone through a friendship breakup?"
mhm.
And it's hit or miss. Some people are like, "Yeah," and some people are like, "No." And sure, of course, that makes sense to me. Not all friendships warrant a breakup.
Sure.
Right? Like, if you have a not very close friendship with someone and you
Oh,
decide
yeah.
this isn't serving you or whatever the reason is, you can kind of fade away, and
Mhm,
that
mhm.
is fine and appropriate. You don't need to
Sure.
break up with a person, like that. That's not what the relationship needs. But when you have a very, very close friendship or someone that is really important to you,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
they let you down once, a million times, whatever it is,
Mhm, mhm.
yeah, that can warrant a breakup.
Yeah.
And you and I have both been through really painful friendship breakups recently.
Yeah, yeah, in the last few years.
Yeah. And we supported each other so much through that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of those things where, like, I felt like a broken record, like, constantly coming to you, and it was akin to, when you're in a bad romantic relationship and you're
Yes.
talking to your
Yes.
girlfriends and they're probably rolling their eyes like, "Dude, just break up with him, he's not worth it," and of
Yeah.
course, you're so lovely and you would never roll your eyes at me in that regard, but yeah, I felt like I was constantly coming to you and being like, "Oh, and then this happened, and then she said this, and then this," and, like, "What do I do?" Yeah, you've really
And
helped, like, midwife me through that.
ugh, I never felt that way. I never felt like, "Oh my god, I wish she'd shut up." Um, but also, you got a therapist.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That drove me to therapy.
Like, whoa. And okay, so tell me about your breakup.
Oh,
I know.
gosh. So this
Like,
was a friendship, like a 30-year friendship for me. This was one of those friendships I do not have or have historically not had an amazing relationship with my mother in particular. And this was one of those friendships where I could say to her, "So I talked to my mom today," and like she would just know. Like
yeah.
she would know exactly all of the things that went into that big ball of mess,
Mhm.
without me having to do the
Mm.
elevator speech about that or
Right.
without me having to give any of the background. She just knew. And we had been through so much together. Just, I mean, of course, over the course of a 30-year friendship. And it was such an important friendship to me, such an important relationship. And again, one that we had nurtured, I think. And of course, one that had changed over the years, but one that was always, always there. So she lived in town when we moved back to Kansas, and she also came to Florida and visited us. And we would
Oh.
see her when we came back here to visit, and we would get together. I can't remember. It might have been once every couple weeks or once every 3 weeks, maybe once a month. I can't remember. We would get together in person and go out and chat, and then at a certain point, she started, and this was pre-pandemic, she started saying like, "Oh, I can't get together this week. I've lost my voice. I probably can't see you for about 6 weeks."
Hmm.
And I didn't even question that. I didn't even think, I thought, "Oh, of course she's telling me this. Of course it's true." And now looking back, I wonder if that was really the beginning. And she was going through some stuff, and I don't know that I was privy to all of it, but she was clearly going through some stuff. And, I would text her just saying like, I'm thinking of you, and I hope you're doing well, and I love you. And we would get together, but really intermittently, maybe once every 6 or 8 weeks. And
Mm.
then that stopped. And then she stopped responding to my text messages. And I was just so confused. I just had no idea what was going on. And I would see what I thought was her car, in town. I remember this actually, this one instance. My husband was out of town on a work trip, and I was walking the dog, and
Mm.
I saw what I thought was her car pull into a parking lot not far from where I was. And I dragged the dog like through the ice. I'm just trying to get there because I just wanted to see her, wanted to, make sure she was okay or whatever. And I got close to her car, and like tears are welling up, in my eyes. And I get closer to the car, and the person is still in the passenger seat. But I saw then that it wasn't her.
Oh.
And I sent her a text message and, gave a very abbreviated version of that story. And I said, I miss you so much, and I hope you're doing well. And then we were coming up on her birthday that year. And I struggled so much with what to do about that. And,
Mm.
do I send a present? Do I send a card? And I thought maybe she just wants to be left alone. And so I didn't send anything.
Mm.
And then I got an email a couple days later. And the subject of the email was bitch move,
What?
as in like that was a bitch move that you did. And in the text, it was like just really berating me for not sending her a birthday present, not acknowledging her birthday. And I took that all on myself. I emailed back right away, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I think we must have had a misunderstanding. I'm sure that it's my fault." Taking it all on, owning all of
Yeah.
that. And I was like, you hadn't been responding to any of my text messages for months.
Mm.
And so I assumed you wanted some space, and I'm so sorry, just like heart rushing, pouring my heart out to this woman. And she came back and said effectively, no, you're not wrong. Something is going on. And maybe she even said, and I don't want to talk about it. And I let that be. Like, I didn't, like, I'm not going to force you to talk
Mhm.
about something, right?
Yeah.
And then she emailed back maybe a day or two later, and she was like, if I had a friend who told me that I had done something to them, I would be asking them what it was. And again, I responded back. I was like, "I'm so sorry. Gosh, I didn't know you would want to talk about it."
Hmm.
And I said, "Please, like, if I've done something, please tell me what it is." And she sent me this really long, just diatribe, horrible email,
Oh.
um, about all these things that she said that I had done to her. And then I went through kind of point by point, and I tried to defend myself. And she responded, but it just got worse and worse. And that was when I found a therapist. Like I was
Yeah.
just desperate. And when I found my therapist, this was actually the pandemic had hit, so it was hard to find a therapist. But going through the little like elevator spiel of, this is why because everybody would be like, oh, what are you looking for a therapist? Oh, well, this
Mhm.
is what happened to me. And the woman I selected, even in that first meeting, was like, please don't assume that this was your fault. Like,
Aw.
just because she is saying that this was your fault does not make that true. And she said, she's basically been carrying around this bag of shit. And she said, and what she did to you is to say, here, you carry this for a while. And that was eye opening. The idea that it was maybe not my fault,
Mhm.
because and again, the foundational stuff that we carry with us, like I always assumed that everything was my fault,
Me
you
too.
know,
Mhm.
and that if somebody says you did this thing to me, then I'm like, oh my gosh, I must have,
Mhm.
even though it didn't logically make any sense to me, and I don't feel that I had done that. That I had the utmost respect for this friend of mine, but she was saying that I had done this thing. So clearly I did this thing.
Mm.
And it took many, many, many therapy sessions
Mm.
to undo that, you know? And then we were out of contact just forever. I couldn't Those emails were so horrible.
What sort of things did she say in the emails? Were they
Oh
true?
my
Like, what
gosh.
was that shit?
Oh,
You don't have to say if you're not
no,
comfortable.
it's fine. I'm trying to I've blocked a lot of it, honestly. I've
Right.
compartmentalized, but definitely one of them was she was married at the time, and one of the things was that she felt like I was always taking her husband's side. And I was like, "What?" There are two sides to every story, of course, but, like, for everything that she came up with, like, for everything that she held up as, "This is something you did to me," I'm like, "There's a totally logical explanation for this." Like,
Mm.
I'm not out to hurt you in any way,
And you're not an evil
and I'm
bitch.
not an evil bitch. And now I know, like, that she was going through just so much. She was, going through basically the beginning of a divorce. Yeah, anyway, and then after maybe after a year, she reached out to me, she texted me and said, "I would like to be friends with you again, if you're willing."
After how much of a break?
After about a year, I think.
Mhm.
And what I should have said,
Mhm.
right? And yeah, you and I have talked about this. What I should have said is, I have been in therapy for a year, because of those emails. And if you are willing to do the hard work of rebuilding our friendship, then yes, I would like to be in contact with you again. And if not, then I wish you well. I love you and I wish you well. I should have said that, but I didn't, because part of me was still that little girl, you
Yeah,
know, looking for acceptance,
yeah.
um,
And love.
and love. And part of me was still, if you don't X, Y, and Z, I'll hate you for the rest of my life, right? So that those scars were still there. And so I said yes.
Mhm,
And so we met up in person,
mhm.
and yeah, I was really worried about it. I felt it was really awkward. And she said, "Do we have to talk about what happened?" And I said, "I think we have to."
Mhm.
And she gave this very, I mean, I hate using the word bullshit, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. She gave this very bullshit reason, kind of explaining away, why
Mm.
she had treated me that way and how it wasn't really her fault because she was going through all this stuff.
Ugh.
And it was gross. But like, I couldn't, I saw her the way she used to be. I saw her, I think I felt very nostalgic about this
Mhm.
30-year friendship and like wanting to preserve it. And so I said that we could be friends again. I never saw her again in person, but we kept up phone calls and stuff like that. And I got to a point where I knew I could not be vulnerable with her. I couldn't be myself. I couldn't be my whole self around her.
She wasn't a
And
safe person.
she wasn't a safe person. And so then we got into a bit of a fight about, oh, this is like the most ridiculous thing. We got
Mhm.
into a fight about Caitlyn Jenner. You
Oh, I remember this.
remember this, right? We
Yeah.
got into a fight about trans people,
Mm,
and she was taking a line that I thought was pretty damn homophobic and inexcusable. And I wound up sending her, I just agonized over this. I still, like, in my journal, I still have my notes about, like, what should I do, and just kind of weeks of not knowing what to do. And then one night I composed a text message to her, and I said, the thing is, it's not about Caitlyn Jenner.
mhm.
You know, I ever since those emails that summer, I don't feel like I can be myself around you. I can't be vulnerable. I'm not sure that I used the phrase "I don't trust you," but that was definitely the crux of it. And I hit send, and I blocked her, and
Yeah.
I sobbed. And it's still like I'm tearing up right now. Like I think about her every single day. I still do. And this was maybe 2 years ago that this happened. That
Yeah.
we broke up. Um, And she sent a nasty email. I know because I did start reading it, and then I had my husband
Mhm.
just take my laptop and block her on my email. Um, and I don't regret it. I don't regret breaking up with her. It needed to happen. I obviously wish that things had gone differently, but it
Yeah.
was horrible and traumatizing, and
Mhm.
I I still love her, you know? That's the thing about all of this is I still love her.
Mhm.
I don't wish her ill at all. I
Mhm.
hope that she is alive and well and happy. I hope that she has gotten help, but I couldn't be her friend anymore.
Yeah.
Ugh,
Thanks for sharing.
it's like drawing poison out of a wound, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's hard. And you have your own story, I know you do.
So, yeah, my story, this was very good friend, and our families were friends. We had a lot in common, including some of our traumas,
Mhm, mhm. Yeah.
which now, like, looking back, I'm like, "Oh, were we trauma bonding?" And so, thought we were really good friends, thought we were best friends.
Mhm,
I'm
mhm.
considered her my best friend. And over the years, I wasn't getting anything in
Yeah,
return. I
yeah.
Yeah, I was giving, I was, in contact, trying to make plans. How are you? Supporting her through really hard times. She had some awful crises
Mhm.
that I really tried to be supportive through, and I think I was. I think it was a good friend, and I wasn't getting that in return.
Yeah.
For years, I felt unimportant to her, that she didn't text me, she didn't
Mhm,
make
mhm, mhm.
plans with me. What it felt to me was the only times that I heard from her or got anything from her was when it was convenient for her,
Sure. Yeah,
and that hurts.
yeah.
That's like, you don't think of me. You don't That doesn't feel like love. And I know you know the analogy of the friendship, like the checking account.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
So where, you make deposits and you make withdrawals, and sometimes you're making more withdrawals and sometimes you're
For
making
sure.
more deposits, but over time, it has to stay in the positive, and I just felt like I was drained. I
Mhm,
was
mhm.
being drained, and that did not feel good to me at all. And so that went on for literal years, and I didn't say anything, and probably that festered, right?
Of
That
course, yeah.
hurts. And then I went through my own crisis,
Mhm.
and I went through my own trauma, which was so deeply painful, which was my beloved therapist, who I was actively seeing every week and had seen me through so much, killed herself.
Mhm, mhm.
And that was horrible for me. It
Yeah,
was so painful and so traumatizing. And
and
that's how
re-traumatizing.
it was re-traumatizing, yes, because I lost my bio dad from suicide. And that therapist had become a term that I learned from a later therapist. She had become my good mom.
Mhm,
She had played some of the roles that I wished my mom had played.
mhm.
She showed me unconditional love and support, and I lost her
Yeah.
in a really painful way. And that is exactly when you need your friends to step up and be there for you. And she didn't. This friend wasn't,
Mhm, mhm,
and that hurt me to my core.
mhm.
And that was my last straw. I couldn't do it anymore. So what I chose to do ugh, was I separated myself from her for a while. I
Mhm,
was
mhm.
just like this and I was just deep in my
Oh,
grief.
yeah. Yeah.
Oh my god, spinning out from this loss
Yeah.
and not having this best friend have my back, and I was, hurt by that too. And so I was just trying to separate from her to not have a breakup, to avoid having a really hard
Oh, right.
conversation.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, you can only attend to so many things, at
Yeah.
one time. It's not like
Yeah,
you had the bandwidth to
absolutely.
address that.
Absolutely, right? And, but she noticed, after many months, and that I wasn't, like, I wasn't there
Mhm,
anymore
mhm.
in the friendship, that I was avoiding her. And so she called me out via text, and I was like, "Fuck, we're doing this."
Mhm, mhm.
And I put on my big girl panties, and I sent her a message in reply that was like, "This friendship isn't what I thought it was." And then we met face to face to talk about it. And I had made my decision.
Mhm.
For
Right,
me, it wasn't going to be a
right,
conversation where we were gonna work things out.
right.
I
Yeah.
had made my decision that I had spent so many years on this friendship.
Yes.
It wasn't going to change. It was not going to be the thing that I needed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I had been let down too deeply
Oh, yeah.
for me to be okay with this. And, so when we met face to face, oh my god, it was so painful. I wrote up my what I wanted to say to her. I wrote it in advance because 'cause I'm a writer, but
Yeah.
I just didn't want to miss the important parts of what I needed to say,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah,
to
you
to
have to get
try
that
to
out.
to try to explain to her what happened, because honestly, I think she was shocked. And to me, that also showed, like, how out of tune she was with our friendship and with me.
Yeah.
And so I met her face to face, and I brought my sheet of paper, and I literally read it to her like some sort of weirdo, and I was sobbing and my hands were shaking, my whole body was shaking. It was
Mhm,
such an
mhm.
awkward, weird thing. And I read it to her, and she wanted to keep talking, and I didn't have much else to say. And we did talk a little, and it hurt so bad. And that was the hardest the hardest. This was one of the top 3 breakups I've ever had in my life, including romantic.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
the aftermath was heinous as well, because it didn't stop there. I had to see her in my community. I
Yes.
had to see her often, and how awkward that is and
Mhm.
how painful that is, and I felt really ostracized. I
Yeah.
felt Yeah, and nobody knew what was going on, but I think a lot of people knew something happened.
Right. Because
And
it's a larger group of friends.
yeah, and it's like we're in this community here, and, I don't wanna slander anyone, and it's not other people's business necessarily, and I was the one who who initiated the breakup, and I felt like the asshole. And it impacted our family,
Yeah.
because we were family friends, and it impacted other friendships of mine, and so often I was like, "Man, I'm the asshole. I fucked this up for everybody." But the truth is I was doing what was right for me.
Right.
And one of the things that I said to her was, "I'm not available for this friendship any longer,"
Yeah. Yeah.
because I wasn't. I was trying to honor what I needed, and that wasn't it.
Yeah.
Ugh,
And it
and
can
I
feel
and
so uncomfortable, right? To
to
finally set that boundary
yeah,
and to be
right,
honest with yourself, if this is what I need, to center
and
yourself.
deserve, right?
Yeah.
Need and deserve.
Yeah.
Whew.
Yes. And there's no blueprint for any of this.
Right?
You
That's
know?
so that like, thank God we both have therapists because, like, I love having this, like, professional who who is theoretically unbiased, I think they are,
Sure.
and telling me I'm not crazy, that I'm not fucked up, that this is okay, you know? And there were times when I would ask my therapist, like, "How do I do this?
Yeah.
Tell me what to say."
Yeah.
And with time, I'm so proud of myself when I, like, don't need my therapist's advice going into a hard conversation, which that year that I broke up with her, I had, this is so silly. I counted. I had, 5 really hard conversations that year.
Yeah.
The type of conversations that people run away from.
Yes.
I had multiple with my boss because work was shitty.
That's
I had
right.
multiple yeah. I had multiple with my husband
Mhm.
that my therapist said, "Some people would prefer to have a divorce than have that conversation that you had, that it was
Mhm.
brave of me to do it."
Mhm. Mhm.
And I had that breakup conversation with a friend, and oh my god, it was so hard. It
Mhm.
was
Yeah.
so hard
Yeah.
to have all those hard conversations where I said,
Yes.
"This isn't fucking working for me, and I
Yes.
do not accept it any longer."
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I want to tell a story now,
Mhm.
and luckily it's a good story, it's a happy story.
Oh, good.
'Cause this was hard shit. So, I want to tell a story about friendship. This happened in February of 2023. It was my birthday, and, the prologue to this is that I had had 5 really hard years.
Mhm.
In the previous 5 years, I had gone through 2 deep depressions. I had a nightmare dream job that sucked the life out of me,
Mhm. Mhm.
and the death of my beloved therapist in 5 years. It was hard.
Mhm.
And so in 23, I spent a lot of time healing from all those things. And then my birthday pops up in February, and I was finally getting better.
Mhm.
I had gone through some treatments for my depression, which I'll talk about in another podcast, but I did therapeutic ketamine, for my depression and was finally walking out of this dark hole that I had been in. And so what I decided for my birthday was I wanted a dance party. And so I threw myself a very small, birthday party, dance party at my house,
Mhm.
and I invited 5 dear friends, and it was wonderful. It was exactly what I wanted. I literally rolled up the carpet in my living room and turned it into a dance floor. I made this awesome playlist of dance music of everything that I loved. So the night of the party, most of my friends are there. One of my friends, Lynn, hadn't arrived yet, texted me that she had a birthday gift emergency, which is a combination of words I had never heard before in my
Right.
life. Like, what does that mean?
Right. I understand those words separately, but put together, I'm confused. Yes.
Right. So I'm curious at this point. After a while, she shows up, um, carrying this huge box. This box that is so big, she can't. she can barely get through my front door,
Mhm.
but she's also carrying it so it's light,
Yeah.
apparently. Like, what is going on? And she comes in, sets it in the middle of my kitchen. It's a moving box. It's not even wrapped.
Mhm, mhm.
It's like just, a cardboard box, like this side up. What is going on? And on
Yeah.
it had a card, and the card said, "Thank you."
Mhm.
It didn't say happy birthday. Okay, curious upon curious, like, what is happening? So I opened the card, and on the front it said thank you, and inside it said for being a friend. And that, if you don't know, and I just hope that you do if you're listening, that is a nod to the Golden Girls theme song,
Mhm, mhm.
which is one of the best shows ever made.
Yes. Yeah,
And,
objectively.
and if you don't know every word to that song, let me remind you, it's not only "Thank you for being a friend,"
Do-do-do-do.
and then later it goes, "And if you threw a party and invited everyone you knew, you would see the biggest gift would be from Lynn, and the card attached would say, 'Thank you for being a
So
friend.'"
good. I love it. Yeah.
And I open the box, and all of these balloons float out of it.
So good. Yeah.
Oh my god, I was crying. I mean, one of the best gifts I've ever received, and I felt so loved.
Yes.
Not just that gift, but that night,
Mhm.
and having these 5 girlfriends show up and dance in our socks in my living room, and the party felt like a hug.
Mhm, mhm.
And that is my favorite story about friendship.
Yeah.
Like, that's why we do this, right?
Yes. Yes. I love that story.
I want to wrap this up by each of us sharing something, that's bringing you joy, has brought you joy recently. I'll start. My thing is something I saw Friday night. I'm a very cool person, so this Friday night, I was at the grocery store at
Yeah,
8
you
PM.
were.
Be jealous. Woo! Right? And I'm checking out, and I see this woman in front of me, and all she has in the checkout line is grocery store sushi and a bag of Oreos. And she
Nice.
was by herself. I watched her get into her car, and I thought, "That is a good Friday night.
Yes.
I love your choices."
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah.
she was going home to watch some show that she loved too.
For sure. She was gonna binge watch Schitt's Creek
Hell
while
yes.
she's eating her sushi and
Yes.
chasing it with Oreos.
Yes, that woman was my hero.
Yeah.
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 Okay, what's your
That's
share?
so
What do you
great.
have?
Oh gosh, I can't compete with that. I just
I'm
can't.
sorry, I win.
Um, you do. You always do, though.
Oh, no, no, no.
Um, so I'm in a book club and we meet once a month. So our book last month was actually one that I chose kind of just out of thin air. And it's
Mm.
called Shakespeare Saved My Life. And I didn't know a great deal about it going into it, but I could not put it down. It was so good. It's a biography slash autobiography, and it's about this woman who's an English professor at one of the universities in Indiana, not Bloomington, but one of the other ones. And she started a Shakespeare program in a supermax prison, and it was fascinating. And
Interesting.
she really connected with this one prisoner in particular who had been in
Solitary confinement.
solitary confinement. Yeah,
That's
so
that's
he it
inhumane.
is inhumane. And I mean, if you read this book, you will not read this book and come away feeling better about the prison system.
No.
You will feel way worse about it. But
Yeah.
this prisoner that she worked with really extensively had been arrested at 17 for a murder. It isn't even clear that he committed this murder. That's the other
Oh,
thing. Like,
no.
no possibility of parole. This person will be in prison for the rest of his life. But she had these amazing conversations with this man, now a grown man, about Shakespeare. And like, he read all the plays, and they had this program. They had conversations among the prisoners. He was allowed to come out of solitary confinement and yeah, and have these incredible Shakespeare
Wow.
conversations. And it just, I really loved that book. It is a hard read, because it is
Mhm.
about it, because it is a true story, because it is about the prison system in this
Yeah.
country, which is utterly inhumane.
Yeah.
But it was really beautiful. It was brutal, is what it was.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Thanks. You know I love a book, Rico.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So good. Hard, but good.
Mm. Emily, thank you so much for doing this with me today.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
letting me
you.
be your first.
Oh. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being vulnerable. I always enjoy our time together.
Yes, I do too. Thank you for
Uh,
making a safe space.
oh,
Like, thank you for, gosh, for just non-judgmental and open conversation. And yes, that means a lot.
me too.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's nice.
And thank you for your friendship.
Thank you for being a friend.
Oh.
Thank you to any listeners that made it this far. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe so you can catch all the next episodes, and please share it with your friends. Let's make this a party. And until next time, I'm your gal pal Sal, and you're listening to Chin Hairs and F Bombs.